Hi, and welcome to a very special Coworking, a podcast about what makes Coworking special. And this month, we're welcoming Tony, and you tell me again if I pronounce it right. Tony Bacigalupo. Is that correct?
Bacigalupo, you got it.
Bacigalupo, thank you so much. So Tony has been working in the coworking industry for many years, and right now he's the founder of New Work Cities because he's been managing and working with coworking space in New York City for a long time, and now he's helping many spaces become even better. He's also the founder of the Belongfulness and community manager at ScalePass. As I was saying, Tony has been doing many different things, and we'll talk about it later. But right now, thank you, Tony, for being here with us this month.
Thank you so much, Fanny. I am honored to be here. I'm a fan of yours. I'm a fan of this podcast. Anyone who takes the time to create a podcast and call it a very special coworking is someone I admire and a friend of mine. So I'm very glad we finally get a chance to do this.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, because we got to know each other on LinkedIn because we're both fan of coworking. So we end up commenting on the same post. And then we got to know each other and I was like, hey, I should ask him to interview him because it looks like he got so much knowledge and we got to share that with the world. I cannot not do this. So that's how it happened. And first question, how did you start working in the coworking industry? Because usually it's not a childhood dream. You're not like 5 years old asking, what do you want to do when you grow up? I want to be a coworking manager because it wasn't a thing at the time. So it happened along the way by chance.
Yeah. It's funny because I graduated college in 2005. And at the time, coworking was barely just something that had just started. And I could not have had it be a childhood dream at that point. And it turned out that around that time was when Wi-Fi started getting more popular and laptops, these things which we take for granted now. But prior to that time, we couldn't be online without being tethered to a physical location. And so it just so happened that times were changing and I got involved very early on in the co-working world because of that.
Yeah. So when you just finished university, did you already know about coworking? What was your first experience with it?
Yeah. So
if you remember.
I was working for a web development firm and
Yes.
we had an office. And I remember my boss had come in one day. It was a small firm. And he said, hey, the lease is coming up on our office. What do you guys think? Do you like it here? Do you want to go somewhere else? And I jokingly said, we have that VPN set up. We should just get rid of the office and all work from home. And he was like, that's a good idea. And so that's exactly what he did. And I was only half joking, but we ended up going remote in 2006. And of course, at the time, it was a pretty radical thing to do. We actually didn't even tell our clients at first because we thought that they would think of us as being less legitimate if we didn't have a physical office, which is hilarious now. But at the time, years ago, that's what it was like. And we set up working from home. Working from home was really cool for about a year. And then it was the winter of 2007 and I was losing my mind because I hadn't left the house in 3 days. And I realized that while I did not want to feel like I had to go commute to an office every day for the rest of my life, being stuck at home was not the answer either. And so that led to the very logical kind of conclusion of there's got to be something in between, or what if there was something in between? And a little Googling led me to the beginning, the early co-working movement, which was global at that time, but very nascent. And in New York City, I was living close to New York City at the time, there was no co-working space per se. There were spaces that were essentially doing co-working. Even prior to the laptop era, there were these like shared spaces for people would bring their computers in and things like that, but nobody was calling their space a co-working space yet. And so the one thing I found was this thing called Jelly, which was a community hangout event that happened once every other week in a loft apartment in Midtown Manhattan. And so I went to that and was for the first time in the same room with a bunch of other incredible people who were just all creative entrepreneurs and exciting and interesting and working on cool stuff. And I did my job from some guy's couch and fell in love. And I said, I want this every day. I want lots of other people to be able to experience this for reasons we'll get into. And that's what started me on my quest. At the same time as that, I was also starting to go to meetups on meetup.com, which I
Yes.
had just found out about also around the same time. And so I started going to those meetups, and I ended up running into some folks who were working on starting a new co-working community with the intention of eventually building a physical space. But the people involved did not have time to actually lead that project. And so I just kept showing up until I was the one people were asking questions to about what to do next. And that was how New York City got started.
Wow, yeah, so interesting to see that. I know those meetups Evan. I've been there myself and with Eventbrite too. And it's crazy how just from one touch point, so the Jelly network at that time, you found your community and you found people here and here and here and got all linked together. And that was your experience of co-working. What made you want to start working in it and not just being part of it and just benefit from it, which is also amazing?
Yeah. At the time, it was a matter of the fact that New York didn't have one. And so there were, as I said, shared office spaces. There were some people who were
Yes.
doing kind of similar things. But in terms of space like we think of it today, there wasn't anybody who was doing it in New York City. And there were people who certainly wanted it. And I think I didn't really fully understand it in the moment because I was, I don't know, 24, 25 at the time,
Yeah.
is that I was so deeply personally passionate about the creation of spaces that people could go and find their people. And that was something that really has become a thread throughout my entire life and my career. And so
Yes.
that's been just a massive part of my story. And what I really wanted was to help people find their people, to help people find places that they could go and belong.
Yeah.
And co-working was not just co-working, but the fact that there was this opening where
Yeah. Yeah.
people wanted co-working, but nobody was doing it. And I said, this is a chance for me to contribute
There's a
something that
gap.
is, that I care about. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. And then at 25, you just start your own co-working space in New York City like that?
No big deal. Yeah,
How
I
did,
just walked in the door and someone handed me the keys. No, it took years. I had no money. I had no experience. I had no business doing any of this. But I was passionate and energetic and energized. And I wanted to I just wanted to build. I wanted to gather. And so I started hosting a monthly happy hour. I started helping to run the jelly groups. The amazing guy who had started it, Amit Gupta, was actually leaving New York for San Francisco. And so I actually moved into his apartment and took over with a few other folks, took over helping run those jelly events. And so I just got
okay.
very, very active, very involved in a lot of that. And then, and I went to every event that I could. And so I was very much an attendee first and a community organizer next. And it was only after having built a lot of momentum, a lot of goodwill, a lot of support and participation. It was very much a community project. It wasn't
Yeah.
Tony's show and you're going to just consume it. It was, hey, I need help. I don't know what to do next. Who wants to design a logo? Who wants to help me figure out how to get a partnership for some materials for the space? Everybody was involved. Everybody was helping out. And that was locally and also through the global co-working movement.
Yeah, because we've been talking about New York, but you say that the co-working movement started globally. but bit by bit. So you had links with other location and exchanging, sharing best practices and lesson
Yeah.
learned.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So the co-working movement is actually a decentralized movement. So now co-working emerged as a phenomenon across the world. And so there are many people who could legitimately claim to have started co-working, and everybody is correct because it just was an emergent phenomenon. But the word itself, the co-working word, actually came about because a guy in San Francisco, Brad Newberg, started organizing these co-working events, which were a little different from co-working spaces that we know of today. It was more of a structured program. And some of the first people who came in there were Tara Hunt and Chris Messina, who were very open source technology minded folks, saw the potential in co-working, ended up building Citizen Space, which was the first kind of prototype co-working space that a lot of us have imitated since, where you have shared desks and people pay monthly membership to share the space, things like that. But what they did was they very deliberately architected the effort to spread co-working to be a decentralized and open source endeavor. And so my first encounter with that was the co-working Google group, which has since been moved to a self-hosted platform, but you can still find access to it on coworking.com, which the movement now owns. And the co-working Google group was amazing because it was just thousands of people who were interested in co-working, building co-working spaces all over the world, talking about this every day. And I started out as a lurker. I eventually started finding opportunities to contribute just by reading a lot and sharing my own experience, and eventually started becoming a leader and a more prominent and visible figure in that group. And then once we started meeting up in person and doing conferences and things like that, I was always there for all of that as well. And it was such an incredible experience, such a formative experience for me that in parallel to building my own local community space, I was
Yeah.
also witnessing and supporting the nurturing of this global movement where people were building their own communities and their own spaces in every corner of the planet. And I have talked to people in probably over 100 countries who have been building co-working spaces. And it is amazing how much of a kinship we feel and how fun it is to be in a room full of other co-working people, because we all have a similar spirit and desire to connect and bring people together.
Yeah. No, that's really nice as you also building locally and building globally in between yourself. So it's not just a community for your members locally in your own space. It's also a community for you, your staff, and the other spaces around you, all linked together in a very big network.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like the change the world phrase became almost a punchline that I think the millennial generation was raised with this. I want to grow up and change the world. And we didn't really know what that even meant, but we had this vague notion. But I really wanted to. I wanted to fix what I saw was broken. And part of what I saw was broken was that I was growing up dreading this idea that I was going to graduate college and commute to a cubicle to be miserable all day working 9 to 5 for a widget company. And with co-working, I saw an opportunity to forge a different path and to create a different opening for other people. And like, for example, when I would train someone who worked at the front desk at my space, which was sometimes an employee, sometimes a volunteer, many times it was me, I would tell them, look, when somebody walks in the door, part of our job is that we're running a business. And if somebody wants to sign up, we want to help them get started. But part of our job here is that a lot of people who are going to walk in that door will have never seen something like this before, and they're not going to necessarily know what to make of it. And so part of our job is to help people understand what this place is and what it's about. The fact that you're walking in here, you're not walking in here because your boss assigned you a location to work in. You're not walking into a place where, everyone's working on the same job for the same company. Everybody here is in it together. If you need something, you can do it. If you want to talk to somebody, you can talk to them. If you want to create something, you can create it. We're all creating this together. And that's a radical thing for people who have maybe never been in a room like that before. And that was a big part of the point, was to show people what was possible.
Yeah. Super interesting how I've seen a lot of newsletter and article recently about how we're talking about coworking for the coworking folks. So people who work in coworking or are members of coworking, but not people who do not know about coworking yet. And as you said, they don't know what to make of it. So they don't understand it, they've never seen it. They're like, what is this? So how can we explain it, educate those people, which is the majority or yet still already now? And how can we explain them and see and help them see for themselves if it's for them, yes or no?
It's actually even worse than that, because co-working, thanks to certain larger entities, co-working as a word is largely associated with something that isn't really co-working, which is shared office space that doesn't involve community. And I've even seen people say, and it breaks my heart, but I've seen people who are building co-working spaces say, this isn't a co-working space, it's a community space. I'm like, no, that's what co-working's about. That was the point. But people associate it with something that it's not, and it's been co-opted in a large way. To answer your question, what we need to do and what's most effective is just not to worry about semantics and trying to explain like, oh, co-working means this. It's more about showing it through action, through gathering and through doing fun stuff that brings people together. And so if I'm running a co-working space and I encounter someone who I think ought to be a part of the community or ought to understand it, but they don't necessarily have the language, they don't know what co-working really means, I'm not going to sit down and be like, let me tell you about how in 2005, there's a thing called co-working and it's a move. Like that's not going to work. What instead I'm going to say is, hey, me and a bunch of these people from this space, we get together, we eat tacos every Tuesday at 12:30. You want to come join us and I'll buy you some tacos? And I'm not even going to mention co-working and have them break bread with other people, make a friend, have a good time, and then wonder where the heck all these people are hanging out all day, and have that become the entry point.
The hook.
At some point I realized, because competition started getting crazy and I had no money in New York City, I couldn't compete on being the only co-working space in town after a couple of years, because now there's all these guys with billions of dollars down the street who are advertising like crazy why their product is better. And what I realized is I can't compete with that. And so, and what people want isn't really workspace. Most people who go to co-working spaces don't need workspace. They need what happens in that workspace. They still pay for the workspace, but it's a vehicle. And so what I started to do is I changed my message away from on the homepage saying, hey, come in for a tour to rent space or pay for membership to access our space. And I moved it more towards, come join us for this next thing we're going to do together. Come find something that you want to do here. Look at what we have going on and come and participate. And then once you're in the door and you meet awesome people and you learn something, you have a good experience, you eat some food, whatever it is, and you say, wow, I really like this place. I really like these people. Wait, so what is this place anyway? Now we're ready to talk about co-working. And that was far more effective and authentic and felt good to me, because it sucks. Like when you run a space, you are always trying to get people to give you money to spend time in that space. Right? Like you're basically always trying to sell space, and everybody knows that. So if I walked up to you at an event or on the street and I said, hey, I run a co-working space, immediately in your head, oh, if I tell him I work from home, he's going to try to sell me space. And I don't like that. I don't want to sell you space. That's not what I got into this for. What I'd rather say is, hey, we've got tacos, or we've got a monthly happy hour where we invite some artists to come in and give a talk, a speaker series, whatever, totally free. Come hang out with us first Friday of the month at 6 p.m. Here's a token for a free drink, whatever it is. And I don't want you to give me money. I don't want to sell you anything. I want you to come and make friends in my space and have a good time. And then if you want to stick around and become a member and come here more often, wonderful. But I don't want my mentality to be, oh, I got to figure out how to get more people to rent space for me, because it's just not what I got into this for. And that's one of the things that a lot of co-working space owners get caught up in, is that
Yeah.
once you sign that lease, it's, oh my God, I've got to pay this rent. I got to get more customers. And you start thinking like a landlord, and you start thinking about, I got to get butts to go into the seats. And then you start to lose the magic. And so it's something you have to very consciously push against.
Yeah, it's really interesting as it also echoes to your experience. First, you've been an attendee to events, to gathering, etc. And then you started to build your space. So it was first the community and then the physical space. And that's what you're recommending, to show the community, show all the events, all the things you're doing, and then maybe people will rent a seat.
Yeah. Yeah. And if somebody comes up to me and says, hey, I want to be a member, I want to join today, great. Awesome. Cool. I wouldn't join a co-working space without seeing if I like the people in the room first. We got to warm people up and get them excited about the possibility of being part of this. And maybe we're not the right community for you. Maybe the community down the road is a better fit, and that's fine. We'll send you their way.
So that's been your experience with co-working. So first you're an attendee, then you manage your space. I understand today you're not managing your own space, but you help people manage theirs.
Yeah. So for many years, even when I was running my space, I was speaking, I was writing, I was helping people in the Google group. After closing New Work City, I opened my consultancy, New Work Cities. And New Work Cities was my way of sharing what I had learned, creating materials, templates, facilitating a mastermind group, offering consulting services, things like that. And over the course of the last 10 years or so, I've been helping people all over the world build their co-working spaces and other community projects.
Yes. Where do you that? Do you do that from home, from a co-working space, from both? How do you travel around? Do you stay in New York? How do you manage all that?
Yeah, I've done some traveling, not a lot, but mostly for speaking at co-working conferences, occasionally for a consulting opportunity, but mostly it's been working from home. I do have co-working spaces that I'm friendly with in New York City. My wife and I moved outside of New York City about 2 years ago. And so now one of the things that I'm kind of shifting my focus towards over the last couple of years is not just co-working, but civic participation and connection, and fighting the epidemic of isolation that, co-working plays a huge role in part to maybe help get a better idea of the role that co-working can play in a more proactive way. Because again, one of the problems we had in the co-working movement over the course of that time was that it was hard to distinguish ourselves from the people who were just renting offices and calling it co-working. And you could tell that there was a big fundamental difference in terms of values and mission, but we didn't have the easiest way of articulating what that actually was. And that was part of what permitted the co-opting that damaged the brand of co-working for as long as it did. And so part of what I'm looking to do is understand, how can we have maybe different kind of language we can use, or a more clearly articulated mission that could activate co-working spaces and make them more impactful and more effective, in contrast to the office rentals.
Yeah, what I like to talk about is flex office versus co-working, as well flex housing versus co-living, to show, because I'm also interested in co-living as well. As you were saying, it helps with isolation, with not dreaming, not designing, thinking about another way of living together and working together. And some people have been experimenting with play, not work, not live, but play, a place where we play together. Maybe dancing, maybe something else. So those community spaces where we share something together, may that be living, working, or playing, or doing other things. So I like the flex versus co-working, co-living, and co. I don't know. It's an ongoing project.
It is. And part of it also is that I've looked into co-living and a lot of these different kinds of constructs. And what I think is interesting about it is that I think there is a healthy balance to be had between communal living and having space and having privacy. I'm in my 40s now. My wife and I we have a very different lifestyle than we had when I was getting started with this, and that's perfectly normal and okay and healthy. And I think that, everyone has a different appetite for a different level of connection. And
Oh, yeah.
what I think is just so valuable and so important is for people to know what options they have and to find the level of connection and participation that makes sense for them. And probably in my earlier days in my 20s, my dream was to live in a very intentional co-housing community, like very extremely integrated shared setting. And I would say now, probably dream at this phase in my life is more, okay, we're going to have our own house, but be intimately connected with all of my neighbors. I want to be able to walk to the community garden, which has maybe a community space inside of it, which has a classroom, which has a playground, like those kinds of things where there's still an incredible amount of ability to interact and connect with my neighborhood and with my community without it being 24/7 commons. So, different strokes for different folks, but I do think there's a lot of people who are super isolated who could use a little bit more of the other thing.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting also because what do you plan next? Do you plan to work on this? Do you plan to open a new space? Do you plan to open something different that is not quite co-working or co-living, but something else? Or what is in your head?
Yeah, so I would say that right now,
Yes.
first of all, I have a day job. So my full-time employment is with a company called ScalePath. It's a executive membership community for people who run businesses. So it's an online membership group, and that's the thing that I do during working hours to pay the bills. That's really cool, and I could talk about that as well. But in addition to that, my focus is what I realized is that I spent a lot of time trying to create content, trying to build a following, and I suck at it. And I hate it. I'm bad at it.
That's not yours. Okay, okay.
And it doesn't mean that I'm not gonna do it and all of that, but the point is, if I'm just trying to create stuff on the internet, there are ways to create community and connection, but it's an uphill battle at all times because you are in direct competition with every other person on earth who's trying to build a following and get you to subscribe to their thing and whatever. And it's just very hard to make yourself known and to make an impact. However, if I focus locally, like I did when I was building a co-working space, I can achieve much more of an impact, get much more of a following, much more of a name for myself here in Norwalk locally, and cool stuff. And I still have global reach and a global impact, which is exactly what I did with Newark City. So what you'll see now, if you go on my LinkedIn, my latest blog post is about something I did locally here, which was very little lift, not that hard, not that complicated, but pretty cool. And I told that story on the internet
Yeah.
where other people got inspired by it, saying, "Hey, I
Yes.
could do something like that in my city." And now we can start getting that rolling. So my focus is on doing stuff locally, telling the story globally, and eventually turning that into something more. And the dream is coming back to co-working spaces with a call to action to say, hey, here's a way that you can be more impactful in your community. Here's a way that you can have a bigger voice in what's going on and to attract people to your space in a way that distinguishes it from all the other projects that are out there. And that's ultimately where I want to get us back to.
Yeah. To the beginning, I would say, Evan, to have a local impact, local action, and then being able to share it with partners, with colleagues, and have that global indirect impact through them.
Exactly. And also to recognize that if you want to have that change the world idealism, it's not something that you force yourself out of your own passion or desire to change. That's important and it's necessary, but you're also going to find that there are lots of other people out there who care like you do, who are working on stuff, and you don't yet know where it's going to make sense to plug into what somebody else is doing or involve other people. And so part of it is opening yourself up to possibilities.
Totally. We're slowly coming towards the end, but before that, I wanted to ask if there is anything else you wanted to talk about we didn't talk about yet.
I would love, if we have time, I would love to just talk briefly about some of the things we've done here in Norwalk that I would like to invite other people to consider. One is the New in Town meetup. So we started doing an event series where I would literally just bring people together who were interested in, maybe they recently moved to town or not so recently, but they want to find out what's going on in town. And it's been really fun doing that event and showing people what's going on in the city and helping connect them to the other fun stuff that's going on. And then I also found that in the course of doing that I created a compilation of my own knowledge of everything that I found in my city in Norwalk, Connecticut, that was a club, a community, a space, a good newsletter to follow, anything that would help someone find their connections and their people. And I turned that into essentially a directory that I used as a resource during the New in Town meetups. But that led to paving the way for actually creating a physical printed brochure of essentially a club directory for the city of Norwalk. And so that's something that used to be much more common in cities in the United States in the middle of the 20th century. And it's something that I think needs to be much more common. And I've been doing a lot more of those local kinds of simple projects that can help to create more of a sense that this is a place where people can find their people. And so, yeah, I'm working on projects like that, and just look up my latest posts on LinkedIn and you'll see what I've been up to.
Yeah, super interesting, and goes back to action you can do with low effort, or maybe a bit of effort locally, but have high impact both locally and in the end globally too.
That's the idea. That's the way stuff gets done, right?
Thank you so much. If people want to know more about what you're doing in the co-working industry, what you're doing in Newton, where can they check it out and where can they reach you out?
Yeah, so you could find me on the socials. I'm Tony Be Good. So that's TonyBgoode. And you'll find me on Instagram, Twitter, those kinds of things. I spend most of my time on LinkedIn. So right now you would have to spell my name to find me, but it's Tony Bacigalupo, Tony, Tony, Baci, Baci, Galupo, Bacigalupo. And so find me on LinkedIn. I'm also TonyBacigalupo.com.
Yeah, no worries. I'll add the website, the LinkedIn profile, and Instagram in the show notes so that people can easily click and check it out.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for the amazing conversation, and let's catch up again on LinkedIn.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you, Fanny. And anybody listening, hey, co-working, the movement is still alive and still going strong. So go to coworking.com, join the discussions on the forum, and check out the co-working visa program as well.
Thank you. Bye-bye.